"If I sing well, will you give me a meal?" asked the 9-year-old girl, holding tightly to a broken guitar as she stared at the producer of the show Stars of America backstage at the largest television studio in Los Angeles. The man in the expensive suit let out a cruel laugh that echoed down the hallway. "Girl, do you really think you're here to win anything?" "You're here to make the audience laugh." Kesha Williams adjusted the loose strings of the instrument she had found in the trash 3 weeks ago and took a deep breath. At 9 years old, she already knew when someone was completely underestimating her. And this time, unlike all the other times she had bowed her head, something inside her whispered that this would be the last time she would allow herself to be treated like trash. "I understand perfectly, sir," she replied with a calmness that made the producer frown, uncomfortable with the unexpected maturity of this dirty, barefoot child. 2 hours earlier, Kesha was sleeping under an awning when she was awakened by a group of production assistants looking for interesting characters for the show's special episode. They saw her singing for coins and immediately knew they had found what they were looking for: someone to serve as comic relief on a show that sold dreams to some and humiliation to others. "We'll put you at the end," said the producer, consulting his clipboard. "After all the talented kids have performed, you come on to balance the show." What that arrogant man didn't know was that Kesha had grown up on the streets watching, learning, memorizing every detail of how the world worked. She knew exactly why she was there. She knew what role they expected her to play, but she also knew something they would never discover until it was too late. In the last 3 years living on the streets since losing the grandmother who raised her, Kesha had developed something no child should have: the ability to see through the masks adults wore. And at that moment, as she watched the fake smiles and condescending looks around her, she made a decision that would change everything. "Can I ask you a question, sir?" she said, tilting her head slightly with calculated innocence. "Make it quick, kid. We have a show to record." "Do you have children?" The question caught the man off guard. "I do. 2 girls. Why?" Kesha smiled. A small smile, but one that carried something that made the producer's heart race without him knowing exactly why. "Just curious," she replied, carefully storing that information along with all the other things she had observed and mentally noted over the past 2 hours backstage. As she walked toward the stage, carrying the broken guitar as if it were a treasure, Kesha thought about the letter she had hidden in her only possession. A torn backpack, a letter that explained not only who she really was, but also why being on that show was no coincidence. If you're enjoying this story of a girl who everyone underestimated, but who holds secrets capable of turning the tables completely, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because what happens when Kesha steps onto that stage will prove that some people are born to rewrite the rules of a world that insists on putting them down. Backstage at American Idol, Kesha watched silently as the other participating children were treated like little celebrities. Assistants ran back and forth offering gourmet snacks, cold water, and even professional makeup services for each of them. "Attention, everyone," shouted producer Richard Brennan, clapping his hands to get their attention. "Remember, you are the future of American music. Today, the whole country will get to know your talents." Meanwhile, Kesha remained seated on the cold floor of the hallway, still holding her broken guitar. When she tried to approach the snack table, a production assistant gently pushed her away. "Sorry, sweetie, but these snacks are only for the official participants," the woman said with a condescending smile. "You must have come to accompany someone, right?" "Actually, I'm also going to perform," Kesha replied calmly. The assistant frowned and consulted her clipboard. "Oh, yes, you're the special girl." The way she said special made it clear that it was not a compliment. "Well, anyway, you'll be performing last. Very last." Richard approached the group of talented children, completely ignoring Kesha. "Now listen carefully. You are going to represent the best this country has to offer. Sing with your hearts, show off your perfect techniques, and make your families proud." It was then that one of the participating children, a blonde girl of about 12 named Ashley, noticed Kesha sitting alone. "Dad, why is that girl here?" Ashley asked the well-dressed man beside her. "Don't worry about it, princess," her father replied, lowering his voice. "She's here to show the contrast so that you can shine even brighter." Kesha heard every word, and for the first time in a long time, She felt a pang of something she hadn't experienced in years, pure, controlled anger. At that moment, her mind flashed back 3 years to the day she lost her grandmother, Dorothy, the only person who believed that a poor black girl could be anything in this world. Dorothy used to say, "Kesha, my granddaughter, when the world tries to diminish you, you grow twice as big. And when they try to silence you, you sing 3 times as loud." Her grandmother had been a gospel singer in a small church in Harlem for over 40 years. She was the one who taught Kesha not only to sing, but to use music as resistance. "Music is our secret weapon, child. They can take our homes, our money, our dignity, but they can never take away what God has put in our voices." After Dorothy died of cancer, because she couldn't afford proper treatment, Kesha ended up living on the streets. But she carried with her something that none of those television producers could have imagined: years of rigorous vocal training and a deep understanding of music that would make any conservatory teacher blush with envy. "Hey, girl," Richard called, interrupting her memories. "Do you even know any songs? Because it would be a shame to waste TV time." "I know a few," Kesha replied, strumming her guitar. "A few?" Richard laughed loudly. "What kind of a few? Street music? Rap? Something you learned begging for change?" The other kids laughed along with him, but Kesha just smiled, that same small, mysterious smile she had used before. "Can I ask you a question, Mr. Richard?" she said, tilting her head with feigned innocence. "Go ahead." "Did you study music?" Richard looked slightly offended. "Of course I did. I have an MBA in entertainment management from UCLA. "How interesting," Kesha replied, mentally filing away this additional information. "And do you play any instruments?" "I don't need to play to recognize talent when I see it," he retorted, irritated. "I understand perfectly." What Richard didn't know was that hidden in her torn backpack, Kesha carried a letter from her grandmother, Dorothy herself. A letter that explained not only who Kesha really was, but also revealed family connections that would transform that program from a planned humiliation into something completely different. As Richard walked away laughing with the other producers, commenting on how fun it would be to see the little girl try to sing something, Kesha closed her eyes and whispered softly, "Thank you, Grandma. The time has come to use everything you taught me." Each knew humiliation only strengthened something inside her that her oppressors couldn't. See, a silent strength fueled by the very injustice they tried to impose. While Richard and the others enjoyed planning her public humiliation, Kesha calmly walked to a quiet corner backstage. She opened her torn backpack and carefully removed a yellowed envelope. It was the letter her grandmother had left her with specific instructions. "Only open when you are ready to use everything I taught you, my granddaughter." 3 years living on the streets had been enough for Kesha to understand that she was ready. The letter revealed that Dorothy Williams had been one of the first black women to graduate in music composition from the Juilliard School in the 1960s, when that was practically impossible. More importantly, she had been the personal mentor of James Mitchell, the current CEO of the television network that produced American Idol. James had always been like a son to her. "If you ever need help," Dorothy wrote, "go to him. But remember, don't ask for charity. Show him what you're capable of first." Kesha smiled. Even after her death, her grandmother was still teaching her strategy. "Hey, you street girl," shouted Ashley, approaching with a group of other children. "My dad is curious to know how you got in here. Did you lie on your application?" "I didn't lie about anything," Kesha replied calmly, tuning one of the loose strings on her guitar. Ashley sneered. "So, you really think you stand a chance against us? I've been studying at the Manhattan Conservatory for 6 years. I have private teachers who cost more per hour than you probably see in a month." The other kids laughed, but Kesha just kept tuning the instrument, testing each note with precision. These privileged children didn't know was that in addition to her rigorous training with Dorothy, Kesha had spent the last 3 years practicing in places they could never imagine. Subway stations, tunnels, street corners, where she mastered her own voice without a microphone. Cold night, every hungry day, every look of contempt had been, unknowingly, her training for this moment. The other kids laughed, but Kesha just kept tuning the instrument, testing each note with precision. What these privileged children didn't know was that in addition to her rigorous training with Dorothy, Kesha had spent the last 3 years practicing in places they could never imagine: subway stations, tunnels, street corners, where she mastered her own voice without a microphone. Every cold night, every hungry day, every look of contempt had been, unknowingly, her training for this moment. It was then that she noticed an older man watching from the other side of the stage. Gray hair, gold-rimmed glasses, elegant but kind posture. Their eyes met for a moment, and something in his gaze made Kesha's heart race. "Excuse me," he said, addressing only Kesha. "May I ask your full name?" "Kesha Dorothy Williams," she replied, emphasizing her middle name. The man froze. Tears welled in his eyes. "Dorothy Williams was your grandmother?" James Mitchell, the network's executive director, felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Dorothy had died 3 years ago, and he hadn't known she had family. "Where have you been all these years?" he asked. "On the streets, ever since she died." James closed his eyes, filled with guilt. "Do you sing like her?" "She taught me everything I know." "And you came here to show what I'm capable of," she replied simply. James understood immediately. Dorothy always said that the best revenge against prejudice was excellence that could not be denied. "Can I do you a favor?" he asked quietly. "Actually," said Kesha, "can I ask you a favor?" "Anything. Don't interfere." "Let them do exactly what they plan to do to me." "But they're going to try to humiliate you publicly," he said. "I know. And when they try, I want you to record everything. Every second, every reaction, every word they say." The smile that appeared on Kesha's face at that moment was identical to the one Dorothy used to give before teaching someone an unforgettable lesson. "They think they know who I am," she continued. "But they know nothing about what I carry inside me, about the years of training, about the music that runs through my veins, about the strength my grandmother passed on to me." James nodded, beginning to understand. At that moment, Richard reappeared. "Hey girl, it's your time to shine," he said with a cruel smile. "We hope you entertain us well out there." Kesha stood up, adjusted the guitar on her back, and walked toward the stage. But before leaving, she turned to James and whispered, "My grandmother always said that God gives us talents not only to elevate ourselves, but to elevate others who will come after us. Today is not just about me." James watched as the girl walked with a dignity that contrasted sharply with her simple clothes and broken guitar. While Richard organized the cameras for what he believed would be cruel entertainment, James discreetly instructed his own crew to record everything. Because something told him this would not be an ordinary humiliation. It would be the moment when a little street performer would teach an entire country that true talent does not choose cradle, color, or class. The stage lights came on as Kesha stepped into the center of Stars of America. The audience of over 500 people murmured quietly, some laughing, some curious. Richard whispered to his assistants, "Remember, when she starts singing, activate the faulty sound system. I want that horrible hissing sound. It'll be hilarious." Ashley and the others waited to watch her fail. "Hello," Kesha said into the microphone, her clear voice echoing. "My name is Kesha Dorothy Williams. I'm 9 years old, and I want to dedicate this song to my grandmother, who taught me that music has no color or social class." Richard frowned. Something about Dorothy sounded familiar, but he ignored it. Kesha adjusted her guitar and played the first chords. The sound, though from a broken instrument, was pure and precise. Richard signaled. The sound system screeched with static. The audience laughed. "Technical problems!" Richard shouted. "We'll have to end it here." But Kesha didn't stop. She stepped away from the microphone and began to sing without amplification. Her voice, trained in subway stations, filled the auditorium like light cutting through darkness. One by one, people fell silent. Mesmerized, she sang Amazing Grace, in a version that blended traditional gospel with classical precision. Every note was perfect. Every phrase was charged with emotion. Richard panicked. "Cut the broadcast!" he shouted, but it was too late. James Mitchell had already ordered his team to keep filming, live to millions. When Kesha finished, there were 3 seconds of silence before the audience erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, shouting, crying, cheering. Even Ashley and the other children were speechless. James Mitchell took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "my name is James Mitchell, executive director of this network, and I need to tell you who this extraordinary girl really is." Richard turned pale. Kesha. Dorothy Williams is the granddaughter of Dorothy Williams, one of the greatest gospel singers and songwriters this country has ever known. A woman who graduated from Juilliard in the 1960s when that was almost impossible for a black woman. A woman who was my personal mentor for over 20 years. The audience gasped. "Dorothy died 3 years ago, and I didn't even know she had a granddaughter living on the streets," James continued, voice breaking. "Meanwhile, the producers of this show brought this child here not to celebrate her talent, but to humiliate her. It was all filmed, every cruel comment, every act of sabotage, every attempt to turn this child into entertainment at the expense of her dignity." The cameras found Richard, sweating and trying to escape. "Richard Brennan," James said, pointing. "You're fired, not just from this show, but from this network. And I doubt any other broadcaster will hire someone who thinks humiliating children is entertainment." The audience booed fiercely. James turned to Ashley and the others. "I hope you've learned a lesson about judging people by appearances." Ashley lowered her head. Several children began to cry. James knelt beside Kesha. "Kesha, on behalf of this company, I apologize. Your grandmother would be proud of you, not just for your talent, but for the dignity you've shown." "She always told me that music is our secret weapon," Kesha replied softly, "and that the best remedy for prejudice is excellence that cannot be denied." The phrase echoed through the auditorium, captured by cameras and broadcast to millions. As security escorted Richard out of the building, the audience continued to applaud. His 20-year career ended in minutes, destroyed by his own arrogance and cruelty. As the program's credits rolled with Kesha being embraced by James on stage, a powerful truth spread across the nation. Underestimating someone based on their background is always a mistake.